Hi everyone, and welcome you to this part 2 video of exception handling. And in this video we will see how to handle exceptions and user defined exceptions. Handling exception. You might have come across this scenario in your program. If any line produces an exception, the program will stop there at that line and it won't execute the remaining lines. So we are going to use some keywords in Python for even if any lines throw an error, the program won't get stopped. First we are going to use a try block, which is used to organize a block of code that is expected to produce an error and throw an exception. Following try block, we are going to use a except block. It is used to catch the exception thrown by the try block and handle it. Syntax for handling exception. First we start with the try keyword. At the end, place a semicolon and write the code with the indentation here. While running the code, the interpreter finds any error, it won't terminate the entire program because the control was inside the try block. Instead of terminating the whole program, it searches for the except block, which comes after the try block, and starts running the statements in it. The else block and final blocks are optional, but if you use the else block, the else block gets executed only if the code in the try block doesn't produce any error. If it does produce an error, then the else block won't execute, and the final blocks always execute even if the try block throws an error or if it doesn't throw an error. Let's see an example program. Programs to divide two numbers. First we declare a try block here. If no error occurred in this try block, the program ended with printing the result. If any error raised in the try block, the control will come to the except block and print that it is an invalid input. Let's run this program. For the first value, I am going to give 12. And the second value is 0. Like I told you before, if any value divided by 0 in comparison, it is an error. So the value 12 is get divided by 0, it gives an error. Since we return this code inside the try block, the error will be catched by the except block and printed it is an invalid input. Let's run this program again. This time for the value I'm going to give some string. Let's say py. It printed invalid input, because in the input line I'm converting the input into an integer. By default, Python gets input in the form of string. Since the input I have given is an alphabetic, so it cannot be converted into an integer, so it produces a value error. Even if the value, like I told you before, Python gets input in the form of string. So even if we pass 1 to first it travels, it gets in the form of string, and by using the type converters like int here, the 1 2 3 it converts into an integer form. If we use float, it converts into a float form. If we try to convert from some alphabets into an integer, so it produces an error here, like value error. So the try block raised in value error, and the error is catched by the except block here. So let's run the program properly this time. And the first value I'm going to give 12 and the second value is 2. Now we get the result as 6. The try block doesn't produce any error, so we get the result as 6. Now we see the example for try with multiple except block. And we are moving again with the same program dividing two numbers. Like previous example, same, if any error raised in the try block, it will be catched by the except block. In previous example we used single except block. In previous example we used only a single except block. Whatever the error, the except block only printed, it is an invalid input. Here we are using two different except block for two different exceptions. If the try block produces zero division error, it is catched by the except with zero division error and prints cannot divisible by 0. And if the value error raised in the try block, it catched by the except value error and print enter only integer input. Let's run this program here. For the first value I'm going 12 and the second is 0. See, it is printed, it cannot be divisible by 0. The zero division error raised in the try block, so it catched by the except with zero division error and printed cannot divisible by 0. So we run the program again. I'm giving some string here. It printed the enter only integer input. The value error raised in the try block, so it catched by the except with value error and printed enter only integer input. Whenever you thought that this kind of error is going to rise in your program, so you can declare an individual except block for the individual error and write a corresponding code in that except blocks. And in this example and also in previous example, you see that once the control came from the try, it cannot go back to the try block itself. So we are going to use a function recursion to perform this control moving back to the try block. So first we declare a function def, that's a function name is run, and give an indentation here. So if any error raised in the try block, it comes to the except block and prints whatever the corresponding error it is, and we're going to call the same function again and again until it prints the results. So now save the program and run it. So this is the syntax error. I just want to show you in the runtime how the syntax error will rise. So the first value I'm giving the same 12 and the second value is 0, and you can see the zero division error raised in the try block and it catched by the except with zero division and it printed cannot divisible by 0, and it won't stop and it moves to the it calls the run function. The control move back to the try block and it's now requesting for the first input. So the first input we give 12 and second is from string, and you can see it printed the enter only integer input. So the try block raised the value error and it is catched with the except value error and it printed that enter only integer input, and it calls the run function again, and now the control moves to the try block again, and now it is already requesting for the first value and second value. And the first value is 10 and second value is 12, it gives the result 5.0. Once the result is get printed, the program is completed and it terminating. And it is the example for try, except and else with the same program. And you see that there is two different program, one with the single except and other with the multiple except. The use of the else part here is, if you think that your program might produce an error or it may not produce an error, and if it is producing an error, the control will shift to the except block and won't go back to the try block. So you have to write a code in two different ways. If error is raised, go to the except block, else complete the try block and go to else block. Once the control move to the except block, next it won't go to the else block. The except and the else block is executed in the either or fashion. let's run this program. Let's run the first program. For the first value I'm giving 12 and second is 2. It is printed executed without error, so the else part is executed. Let's run it again, and this time we'll pass 0 for the second input. So it printed that is an invalid input, which means that there is a 0 division error is raised in the try block, and it is catched by the except and handled by printing invalid input. Now run the second program. So similarly like the first one, if no error is in the try block is raised, then the else part is executed. If any error is raised in the try block based on the exception, the except will catch them unhandled. For a single try block you can have multiple except block, but for a single try block you should have only one else block. And the last example, try except and else finally. Like I said before, if any error in try block got raised, then the control moves to the except, and if no error is raised, the control moves to the else. And the except and else execute in either or fashion, but the final block will always execute. Either the try produces an error or if it isn't. Now we run the program. I'm passing a real values now, like values that doesn't produce any errors. Okay, and you can see that the no error is produced in the try block, so the else part is get executed, and as well as the finally block. Now run this program again, and this time we'll pass values that produce error, and for the 0, and using the try block, there is a 0 division error is raised in the try block, and it is catched by the except block, and also the final block is executed but not the else block. So this is how the final block will works. User defined exception. Python allows programmers to create their own exception by deriving classes from the standard built-in exceptions. In this workshop series, you will learn Python in the beginner level. The beginner level means whatever the topics we are covering in this series, that all comes under the beginner level. In the intermediate level, you will learn advanced topics like classes, OOPS concepts, data structure in Python. Why am I telling this is, the syntax for creating user-defined exception will contain some class concepts. If you people already know Java or OOPS concepts, you can really able to understand them, but for others, just get to know how the syntax will be. Syntax. So in this syntax slide, whatever you're going to see in black color, that should definitely be present in your code. And except for the heading syntax here, I am not mentioning this one. And green is going to be your code, and violet is for either rise or assert statement, and blue is going to be the name that you given to the class. First we are going to declare a class. The class is the name as like the class is same as like def for creating functions and class for defining new classes. And next is going to be the class name, and inside the parenthesis it is an exception, which is the base class for all the exception. Here we actually inheriting the properties of exception to our class. And next we do no coding here, just type pass. And next going to be the try and except block that you already know. And here is the rise statement. You can also use assert statement based on how it is needed for you. This is the syntax for creating user-defined exception. So we will see how to create user-defined exception. And this is the syntax for user-defined exception. I'm going to create a program. If the user enters a number is greater than 9 or lesser than 0, it is going to throw an error, too high or too low respectively. and we're going to create two high and two low errors that are going to be user defined errors, which I'm going to create them. Like the syntax say, first we have to create the class. We first create a class for the two high exception class, followed by the exception name high value, and inside the brackets we're going to pass the base class exception. Just type pass. We don't have to do any coding here. And let's create another exception saying low value and pass exception and colon and pass. So this is how we create user defined our own exception. Let's check whether they are raising exception or not. And rise high value. Now save it and run this program. Yeah, it's raising an error. You can see here. Now check for the low value. Yes, low value is also raising an error. So this is how we're going to create our own exception. Let's write the program. Let's define a try black. This time first we are going to get input from the user, so get inputs, enter value, and we are going to check. We are going to write an exception if the value is lesser than 0. So if the value is lesser than 0, 0, and we're going to raise an exception. So we're going to raise an exception high value error. And or if the value is greater than 9, greater than 9, and we're going to raise a low value error. If the both condition is not satisfied, then this definitely will be lies under between 0 to 9. So we'll print the value that the user entered. Okay. Now we write an except block for catching the exceptions. We will write even our own exception. We can catch them individually. So let's write individual except block for these two different exception. First for high value. If the high value error is raised, so we're going to print the value is too high. And accept. So this except for low value. If the low value error is raised, so we're going to print the value is too low. So this is the program. Now we run this program. So first we enter a low value. Let's see it rising the low value error. Wait, I just missed it. Just change it as low and change here as high. Okay, now say it and run it again. So we'll enter a low value, and the low value error is raised in the try block and is catched by the except low value block, and we entered a high value here. It's 20. Yeah, high value. True value is also right. High value is also right. Let's enter a value input now. And you see no error is raised in the try block, so it ended with printing the value that you entered. And you can, so this is how you create a user your own this is how you create your own errors in Python. Thank you all for watching this video, and this is signing off, Srinivas Kalyan. Bye.